Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the video. So we're changing the brake pads and the rotors and wheel bearings on a 93 Ford Ranger with automatic locking hubs. So right now I'm just taking off the tire, and before we go any further, you're going to need this tool for the automatic hubs. If you have the manual locking hubs, you're going to need a different one, but you will need this. There's basically no way to do it without it. It's going to save you a lot of trouble, so make sure you have it before you even start the job. So here I'm just laying out a board so I can set the parts on. I'm going to take off the cap first, and it just pulls right off once you take the tire off. Following that cap right there, you're gonna take off a little seat clamp. Basically holds everything else on there. Comes off pretty easy with a screwdriver. Just a second, I'll show it to you. There it is. So next you got a groove little washer that should pop right off. And this next part right here is a little bit more tricky. There's nothing really holding it on except for just pressure by springs around it. So you're gonna have to work it off however possible. You see I use a screwdriver in my hands. It's basically just real slippery with all the grease and oil on there. But you want to be careful because right behind it there's two really fragile washers. And you want to make sure you don't break those if you plan on using them again. So right about here you'll see I'm able to break it free with a flathead screwdriver. And there's the first little thin washer I was talking about, followed by a second one. Now you can take the calipers off first if you'd prefer. I just did this because it just came kind of as instinct to me. Just kind of clean up the axle a little bit, get a little grease off there. And next I'm going to take off the calipers. They're held on by two pins where you just saw me show with my finger, and you basically take it out with a flathead screwdriver, or you also see I'll use a bolt because it gives me a more even push on both sides. It's basically two little pins held together by rubber in the middle. It's just one piece. There it is. You take out the top one first, and then you take out the bottom one. That's just what I used right there. That's just the bolt I'm using to knock those pins out. If you're going through the trouble of changing your brake pads and rotors, you might as well replace the wheel bearings and seals because it's only about $10. But anyway, there's the pin. Show how that just pops out. So next I'm just going to knock the brake calipers a little bit with the hammer to break them loose, and they should basically just slide off if you gently tap it or pull it. The reason I'm actually changing them is you'll see in just a second where it seems that the actual back pad just fell off on me, so it went metal to metal all of a sudden and basically destroyed the rotor real quick. So it was a little bit harder to actually pull it off, but so the back brake pad is actually, it just sits in there for the most part. Once you take the caliper off, it'll slide right out the back. And there There you go. Pretty messed up. Here's that fancy tool I was talking about earlier. You really do want to get this tool. It's before you even start. Unlike me, I made the mistake of having the truck jacked up and then trying to call around and see who had it. You're gonna want to tighten that nut up just a little bit, just so you can use your magnet now to pull out the key. It should all be hand tight, hand loose. You shouldn't need to use a wrench. Then you pull out that key, and I just have it right there on the magnets, and I'm going to keep it on the magnet so I don't lose it. And you're probably going to want to keep everything in order. You see right now I'm just making sure that everything's in order so I know it goes back on exactly the same way that I took it off, at least if you're planning on reusing it. Here's that tool. As you see, it's just basically hand tightened on there. So you can just use that with your hand and just unscrew it basically all the way off. Just a warning that that socket is actually a little bit bigger than the nut that you're unscrewing, but it should work since it's not going to be tight. It shouldn't be tightened, and it might be rather difficult to find the perfect size. Take a closer look at that nut right there. And I tried to use channel locks and vice grips and just about everything, and you basically really need that tool, especially when you put it back on. So there's the wheel bearings, yeah, outside wheel bearings. They'll just pop right out. They're only like 10 bucks for the cheapest set, like 17 for the nicer set. So well worth replacing if you're in there. If you don't want to spend the money, at least replace the seals. As you see, the wheel bearings should be stuck actually in this rotor, but unfortunately mine were not. But if they are, you basically just use a screwdriver to break the seal loose, and then the wheel bearings will actually pop out. But you're going to need to replace that seal. It's about 7 bucks. So here I'm just I'm filling this up with gasoline just because it's cheap, but you could use a cleaning solvent, kerosene, gasoline, and I'm just going to basically wash off the parts that I'm reusing in that gasoline. Right now I'm using a nylon brush, just cleaning up the caliper and the axle a little bit, and that'll hopefully reduce with squeaking in the future and just make sure everything goes back on there. So now I'm cleaning all the parts that I'm going to reuse just in the gasoline. Here we go. You see the wheel bearings actually in there. I hit it with basically a 4x4 to get it all pressed in with the seal at the same time, a nice even pressure. But then once that's in there, then basically that rotor will just go right back on. Shouldn't be a problem. Everything's greased up real nice. Make sure you repack the bearings, especially if you use the same old bearings. You're gonna want to clean them out and repack them. And the new wheel bearings for the outside will just slide right in there. Followed by that nut, if you will. I'm just going to grease that up, and then you're just going to use that socket or that big old tool or a shirt or something, it's probably going to be greasy and hard to go on there. If you try to put it on backwards, it will be much more difficult to put on, so that little lip should stick out towards you. And then I just use a shirt just so it doesn't slip so much. Screw it back on there. And various people will tell you that once it's tight, you crank it, and then you back it up and you crank it a little tighter, but I basically just get it hand tight, so there's still free spin in the rotor. And then there's little notches actually on that nut that line up with the hole where the key will go, and I just crank it a little bit tighter right till that notch lines up, and then put the key in there. There should be no play in the rotor. So as you see, it still spins pretty freely. It's about hand tight. So I'm just cleaning it up so I can actually see the grooves right now on the nut, and then I'll just line that groove up with the there's the groove I'm pointing to. I'll just line that up right where the key should go. If you have it lined up right, it'll go in without a problem. So let's take that key and wipe it off. Take it off of my magnets. And it'll just slide right in there without a problem. That first seal, and then I'll put a little bit of grease on top of it, and then followed by the second seal. Or washer. And this piece may be the trickiest piece. There's a little notch on top, so it'll basically only fit on there one way. But when you got it all greased up, it's going to be a pain in the butt to get it on there probably. Doesn't really screw on or anything, it just pops on. It's got the pressure with the strings. So yeah, you're just going to want to keep working it until it'll eventually pop on there, either with your hands or with a screwdriver. But sooner or later it'll work for you. Kind of got the top set in place there, and then just got the bottom, push it on with the screwdriver. You're good to go. Just make sure everything's got a nice little layer of grease on there, and then I'm going to put this little slotted washer on there, followed by that little C-clamp. Should pop on without too many problems. Make sure everything spins and everything. Make sure it all looks good, not too much play. You're going to want to clean that cap out. There is a washer on it, so be careful not to lose it or tear it. And then repack it with grease. And then here I'm just taking brake cleaner. I'm cleaning off. The factory has like some glue or something on those rotors, so you're just gonna want to clean all that stuff off, plus all the grease that you may have just got on there accidentally. You're gonna want to make sure to clean the backside too before you put it on, or if you haven't at this point, you're gonna want to go over there and clean it while you still have access to it. And then the cap just slides on. So now I'm starting on the calipers, and right there I'm basically just using whatever you could use, a C clamp, or those are just clamps from Harbor Freight that were like $2, and I just put 2 of them on there, and I open the brake fluid reservoir and just use it to squeeze the hydraulic all the way so it's flush, which will make it much easier to slide onto the rotor later. So now I'm just putting on the outside brake pad, and it'll basically just clip right on there. You can get some sort of anti-squeak stuff which I put on there, which is supposed to help with squeaking later on. And then you just slide the rear brake pad right in there, and then you just drop the caliper right over it. And I'm just using the screwdriver right there to make sure that the rubber sleeve, the little seal in there, doesn't get caught in there and end up ripping. Just making sure it's out of the way. And when you get it all set up, I'd start by trying to line up the bottom and then moving the top in, and when it looks just about right, you grab those pins that you pulled out originally, and I clamp them with vice grips. It just makes them go easier. They're supposed to be lubricated for life supposedly, but probably not, so I put a little bit of grease on them, help them go in easier, and probably come back out easier the next time. And then you just work it in with a flathead screwdriver. You go from one side to the next, or you can use bolt if you have it, or anything that'll work. So I just start with the bottom, get that in there, and then I move up to the top. Just work it all the way in. At this point I'm hooking up a tube, and I'm just gonna bleed the brakes. Got my buddy inside pumping the pedal, and I'm just opening and closing the valve right there, letting it come out. Do that on both sides and clear a whole can out, basically, or a whole bottle. And that's basically it. Then you throw the wheel back on. It wouldn't hurt, since you got the tire off anyway, to basically just take brake cleaner and make sure everything's nice and clean before you put the wheel back on. And that's about it. I hope the video helps somebody. Thanks for watching.